relationships. Oh, well, we're going to record now. Got it. Okay. So it like filled the whole screen, Michael. So relationships. Why are relationships important? Why do they matter? Why do we need them? What's significant about connections? I mean, we've been living in this pandemic kind of environment for the last couple of years, and it feels like ages, right? It feels like forever. And we've had to alter how we're connecting and how we're building relationships. And so it's, how do we build connections? How do we build relationships? What do we do? Mike, you unmuted. Do you have an answer? I don't know. Okay. So why are relationships important to us? Why do these matter as human beings? Why does that matter at all, that we have connections to other people? Why can't we just be like, you know, that scene, have you guys seen the movie WALL-E? Where they're all in those little like bubbles rolling through, you know? Why can't we just live that way? Why does it matter that we have all these relationships? Yeah, Shelley, we are wired for connections. There's support, there's a sense of purpose. This all comes from relationships. And Bruce Perry says that the brain's a social organ and it requires affectionate contact to develop. So we know that, you know, if you've worked with a kid with reactive attachment disorder, we know that relationships are important. But I don't know that as a world we're putting all that much value on them as much anymore, especially with our younger generations. They're not putting as much value on them, at least not deep connections. And so connection, I went and looked and I was like, okay, let's find this. And I love Brene Brown, so we got lots of quotes from her. So sorry if you guys hear too much about her. But connection is that energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, right? And we get strength from these relationships. And whether we're an extrovert or an introvert, we can still get strength from relationships and connections. And we're, as Shelley mentioned, we're wired for connections. And when we're not, when we don't have connections, we break, we fall apart, we numb, we ache, we hurt other people. So that's why we need them. And I think that's why, in a lot of ways, I mean, we're in a mental health crisis right now. I don't know how many of you are seeing that, but we're not in a great place emotionally and with our ability to meet the demands of the mental health needs of our community right now. It's really, we're struggling a lot. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But Maslow, going back to our, you know, Psych 101, he talks about love and belonging, and that being just above our physiological needs for air and shelter and our safety needs to have a roof over our head, you know, to love and belonging being that next thing that we need to move forward. And so having that strength of connection and sense of connection is so significant. And then I really love the domains of well-being. I love these 5 domains. I talk about these in therapy sessions, in different trainings that I do. I talk about these because our social, emotional, our moral, our intellectual, and our physical, those areas of our life are so significant. And if we can figure out how to be healthy in all these areas, we really have more of a balanced, healthy well-being. And so as I'm making the case for the importance of our social connection, you know, it's noting social is part of this. And it contributes to our health and our wellness. And then Ginsberg did the 7 C's of resiliency. And the first one that he listed was connection. So like we talk about teens, okay, if we're talking about teens today, we will, but I'm also talking about us adults too, but the connections between teens and adults really reinforce our competence and their competence. And it helps kids feel valued and protected. And Lisa mentioned she was just at a training about those positive early childhood experiences. And how that really, I loved that when you mentioned that, Lisa, because that really does. We talk so much about like the ACEs, but those positive connections that we make really help carry through our lives and help us determine, they're like protective factors for resilience and for strength. And so it's really important. So these are probably preaching to the choir here. We all know this, right? And then in adolescence, we have these developmental tasks of adolescence, and so I bolded the ones that kind of are what we're talking about today, but it's developing a more complex level of perspective taking. So that impacts our ability to develop empathy, understanding and expressing more complex emotional experiences. It's how to talk through what we feel and identify those emotions. We form friendships that are close and supportive, and we renegotiate relationships with adults and other authority figures. And these are all about those connections and relationships. So that's why we have so much emphasis on relationships. But I want to know, how do we feel like technology is impacting these relationships and connections? And guys, I like social media. I like that we have this Zoom thing. I like that we have technology. I like that I can kind of work from anywhere. Maybe that's something I need to adjust, but I like that we can do these things and we can be connected. But how is it impacting connections? Any thoughts? Feel free to throw that in the chat. Okay, well then I'll answer our question for us, okay? So things can be less personal. Shall I, feel like disconnected at times. Yeah, there's a distance that happens. And what's happening in our homes as well is our homes are getting larger, which means we're not sitting there fighting over things as much. So we're not navigating through things. We're not on top of each other. We're not trying to figure out who's going to use the bathroom at this time because everybody's got their own bathroom. I mean, I went and took my daughter to college and we were looking at the apartment setups and I was like, each room had their own bathroom. Like the roommates didn't even have to navigate this stuff. And I'm loving these chat comments, you guys, because these are so true. It's not as genuine. It's not as heartfelt. We're connected. There's more TVs in homes than people. We've got all kinds of internet connected devices. We're focusing on stuff like that's outside of ourselves to heal us. We're not turning to relationships as much. So substances, even numbing out on watching, binge watching a TV show, that's used as like this numbing technique. We're checking our cell phones constantly. There's anxiety when you don't have your phone. Have you ever been on your phone talking and going, where's my phone? I've forgotten. Or is that just me? Like I can't find my phone and I'm sitting there talking on it. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, what is wrong? What's happened to me? People are checking, they're checking their cell phones and their social media sites, 110 times a day, maybe. We're missing out on live events because we're trying to record them and share them. And then here's what I thought was interesting. And these facts are from even before the pandemic started. And almost 2 in 5 people spend more time socializing online than they are face-to-face. And so teens, this comment on here, we're getting sucked into alternate realities, especially teens. Yeah, they don't know what life was like before. When I tell my kids or other, teenagers, yeah, we used to like say, oh, I'll meet up with you over at the Taco Bell. They're like, why would you do that? you can just text them. They don't get that you had to like, there was this mystery in what was going to happen. Now it's all arranged, or we're connecting all the time, or we can like search, find my phone where our friends are and things like that. And kids are saying their parents are too distracted. That's concerning, because as parents, we've gotten sucked into this stuff too. And then if we look at some other data, it's getting harder to remember things as well as we used to. It's harder to focus. And so we're starting to look at things not in paragraphs. So when you scroll through social media and you see a really long post, it's really tempting to just move on from that one. Like it and move on, even though you haven't read the whole thing, you haven't gotten to it. And our brains are being reinforced. So it's like flashcards. We respond to practice and repetition, and our phones, they create lasting changes in our brains because, oh, notification, check that. Okay, we're going to keep doing, we're getting rewarded. And so Catherine Price, she's the author of How to Break Up with Your Phone, as well as she just put a new book out about fun.
I don't know.
Oh, you weren't here last week.
I wasn't here last week.
Oh,
Let me ask.
somebody wasn't here last. But we start getting reinforced for this social media and flipping between apps, and we're training our brains to become more distractible, or worse at staying focused. And if you've ever seen or experienced neurofeedback or biofeedback, our phones really are training our brains. And neuro and biofeedback are training our brains and our bodies and helping us retrain them to be more focused, and our phones are doing the opposite. So, and then we know, and some of the comments have talked about, like real life interactions meet a deeper need for connection, where that social media doesn't. And this is this interesting kind of, contrast is, we get to this point where we're like, okay, I'm not going to care about what anybody thinks about me. I'm just going to put stuff out there, and who cares? And the more that our values and our worth is determined by other people, the more we care about what others think, we lose our courage to be vulnerable. But when we stop caring about what other people think and stop feeling hurt by other people, we lose our ability to connect. So it's like, how do we determine whose opinions are really important and what really matters to us? It's getting harder to figure that out. And we're not as intentional about what we're doing. And I found this little meme. I wish I'd spent more time on Instagram, said no one ever on their deathbed. We're not going to sit there and say, oh, I'm so glad that I spent my life sitting in my room looking at Instagram, or, watching everyone else's milestones, fly in front of me, and that I was comparing myself to all of that. And then we're learning social cue development is also changed because of, it's all the neurosynchronization during that face-to-face dialogue that's rewarding. Again, our brains are rewarding us for the likes, for the comments, how many people viewed our story, all these different things. And it's curtailing these face-to-face experiences, and it's making us less able to read body language. So my kids are taking Chinese, they're in Chinese immersion, and we are watching a Chinese video, and it was all in Chinese, and I have no idea what they're saying. But I was watching it, and I could read the body language, because that's what our skill set is, right? As therapists, our skill set is reading the body language and really understanding what's going on. And I could understand almost all of it. I asked them after, was this happening? And then is this? And we watched it again. But a lot of the kids that were in this room that we were watching this weren't reading that body language. And I could understand the story without using and understanding Chinese. So it's a little scary. And then somebody mentioned we're going to try to figure out how we're not going to be polarized so much, right? Because we're really using a lot of dehumanizing communications in our world right now. I mean, we're just attacking each other. We're rewarded for attacking each other, for reading a line and then saying, no, you don't know anything, you're wrong. There's just so much of that's going on right now. Even over seemingly non-controversial things, they're starting to get controversial. And we're hurting each other. And we're numbing, and we're building up this armor that's just not good for us. Has anybody heard about the Facebook files that just came out? It's in the Wall Street Journal, but there's a whistleblower on Facebook. And has everybody seen like The Social Dilemma? It was on Netflix, came out right around the time of the pandemic starting. Anybody seen that? Michael, have you seen the Facebook files? Yeah. So it's really interesting because basically they're comparing Facebook to the tobacco industry and how the tobacco industry was covering up all that they knew about the dangers of nicotine early on, and that they were aiming that towards teenagers, get people hooked on early, all of that. Like Facebook's being compared to that right now. They're actually saying Instagram's even worse, but Facebook owns Instagram. And so there's a deep dive you can do if you have interest. Just look up the Facebook files in the Wall Street Journal. It just came out in September of this year. And teens are even saying like that their eating disorders are being developed because they're comparing. And it's this whole idea that we're supposed to just put out there everything that is positive. We're not supposed to put out there anything that's like vulnerable, or if we do put out vulnerable stuff, it's really to get the feedback of, oh, you're so amazing, you've overcome so many things. It's that kind of thing. It's how am I going to get the most likes? And their algorithms are setting it up to get kids to get sucked in more. And there's teens now that are reporting they want to spend less time, but they don't feel like they can. They're going to miss something. So it's this whole idea of the fear of missing out and what we're doing. And as I was thinking about that, like we all have our own stories. We all have our own journeys that we're going through. And a lot of times the things that make headlines are the end of people's journeys and their stories. It's when they've climbed the mountain and they've accomplished a task and they've completed school and they've done all these things. We don't talk about the struggle that happens in the beginning and the middle of the story, but we're sitting in the middle of our story and we're comparing ourselves to the end of somebody else's story. And it's making us feel less like we can accomplish things. We think it looks so easy. It's kind of like when I see somebody who just had a baby, I'm like, oh, you weren't pregnant for very long at all. Meanwhile, they're like, I have been miserable for the last 9 months. Like, but to me, it's really easy for me to look at that and go, oh yeah, you had a really easy pregnancy because it was easy for me. Our perspective is a little off, right? But we're comparing ourselves to the end of other people's stories. So what story are we telling ourselves? When we watch those things, when we're scrolling through social media, what stories are we telling, and what are these teens that we're working with? But it's also us. It's us as parents. What those kids are doing this, and why isn't my kid doing that? And we're comparing why is my kid struggling in this area when my friend just reported, that her kid makes the soccer goals every week and wins the game and is the most valuable player and all these things. So we start to develop this sense of like incompetence and we're not measuring up. So it's what do we tell ourselves when we're scrolling through that feed? something to keep asking, you know? So has anyone read a headline and then read the article and said that headline had nothing to do with what, or that headline had nothing to do with what the article was really about? Has anyone ever had that? Yep. Chat, yeah. Here's the thing. I mean, we've been told don't judge a book by its cover, all these things. So I went looking for journalism students, like how they're trained on how to write headlines and what the ethics around headlines are and how they're created and all of that. So, and these are the things that I found, these things that are on the screen right now. It's the right headline can help people learn from the news, and the wrong headline might gain clicks, but encourages readers to remember incorrect information. Does that mean we're not getting any wrong headlines? Like they're teaching journalism students this, but what do they want? It's kind of like when I was, in the 80s, it's like the Inquirer, alien takes over such and such, and this happens. And so we see those headlines and we're going, oh, well, if we're believing all the headlines, oh, there's aliens over here and this is happening. And these people are getting divorced and this marriage is falling apart. It's like all of those things, right? But that's what gets clicks. Or there's those like little, I don't know what those are called when it's in social media. It's like, hey, did you know that this person used to look like this and now they look like this? And they show a picture of some star that's had some, and some celebrities having an alien baby. Yeah, and some star, like you think this whole thing is going to be about this one star, and then you end up clicking through. It never answers the question on this first one. And you're just still going through these things, and they just trap you into this world where you don't want to be, but you're kind of trapped and sucked into it. And headlines satisfy this need for information that we have. So it can say, oh, well, this vaccine's going to give you 5 heads, whatever it is. And you just believe, oh, if I get the vaccine, I'm going to have 5 heads. Like that's how this is going to work. And we don't spend the time really checking and fact checking and making sure. And the reason I'm talking about this is because this is changing our communication style with each other. So sometimes Michael may tell me something and I don't spend the time listening, and he just gives me the headline. And I go, oh, so here's your problem, Michael. This is the problem is, and you need to do this and this and this. And can you just, and he's like, she didn't hear a word that I said. All she heard was this. But what's sad is I'm picking on you because I can see your face, Michael. But the sad thing is, we're hearing that as well with our kids. And we see this, we're doing family therapy, or we're listening to teenagers talk and they're saying, my mom doesn't hear anything, or vice versa. The kid saying, well, my mom just said I had to clean up my room and blah, 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 and that's all. And that's all I'm hearing from her ever. Like, we're not listening to each other. We're not spending the time to really engage. And so I was cleaning my daughter's room out. She's 11 and she thinks everything is really, really important to save, So I find like toilet paper rolls, paper towel roll. Like, I don't know what she's going to do with all this stuff, but it's all in there. And so frequently I have to go in and just kind of like throw things away and empty the trash out. And I found this piece of paper on the ground, and it said, I'm really sad, but I don't want my mom to feel like she has to help me feel better right now. But I'm really sad that this is happening. But I don't want to tell my mom because I don't want her to feel like she needs to make it better. And as I was thinking about, I'm reading this and I'm thinking about this and I'm going, how often have I sat and listened to something she said and I'll be like, it's okay, it'll be fine, it's not that big of a deal, like no big deal. Because all I've heard is that one line and I'm not spending the time. And I'm a therapist and I'm training on this, like I should know better, right? But it's so easy to fall into these traps of just hearing that one little thing or preparing our response to something when, without totally listening. And I think we've all seen that. I mean, how many of you guys have seen that in therapy sessions with people that you're working with, that you're watching them interact and you're like, you're not hearing anything that that person is saying. I mean, I hear that when I'm doing couples therapy. I'm like, did you hear? I stop them and go, did you hear what they just said to you? What did you hear? And it's practicing. What are they saying? And what's your interpretation of what they're saying? And let's talk about it, that meta communication. But I really, I'm making the argument right now that these headlines and our social media and seeing all these things, it's changing our communication style and we're not hearing each other. We're not really developing those connections that are going to truly help us grow as people and grow in our relationships. So Catherine Price again, she's the one that said, let's break up, how to break up with your phone. And I read this and just went, this is so true. It's, we reach for our phones in our moment of downtime and we interrupt the process of forming these new memories and drawing connections between things. And that's like those things that create creativity and insight. And then we check our phones, we find something's waiting for us. We're training those brains to associate checking our phones with a reward, which explains why the more time we spend on our phones, it's harder for us to pull away from them. So it's that constant reinforcement and reminders. But it's also taking away our creativity. Everything is right there. So I should be really excited that my daughter still steals all the toilet paper rolls and the paper towel rolls, because that's her creativity. Just looks like a mess to me, And yes, I will send out the slides. Somebody was asking. So we go into autopilot with our phones, right?
Yes.
It's this process. I've got somebody who's not muted.
Yes.
Okay. But we go into autopilot and we just start going. And before we know it, we've been on there for 30 minutes, just looking at something and delving into something that really isn't what is intentionally what we want to do. And we're focusing just on sharing the best moments, the moments that get us the most feedback. And so our communication is doing that as well. I just feel like that's where we're sitting right now in a lot of our styles. And so what are we inviting people to do in interactions with us? Are we inviting them to really engage with us? Or are we putting up walls a little bit as well by looking at our phone when we are in live interaction? Engage with us, or are we making conscious or intentional choices about what we want to do with our time? We all feel so busy, and sometimes that busyness is that we're checking things or we're getting sucked into unintentional, decisions. So what can we do? So we can set better boundaries with our devices. Has anyone tried to do that? Set better boundaries, move your apps around, maybe turn off notifications, setting these better boundaries. And I'll go through these 3 things in the next few slides here. So it's asking ourselves, when you pick up your phone and you're going to go look at it, what am I looking at this for? What for? Why right now? And what else could I be doing? Is this what I want? Am I consciously making the decision? Because again, I like social media. Like, I don't have anything against it. I feel like, I've gotten to know my cousin that I've never met in person that lives in Australia. And I love that. We've been able to stay connected and really get to know each other and communicate with each other so much because of social media, because we spend the time and consciously make those decisions. But a lot of times in our teens, especially, they're just sitting and scrolling through and seeing the things that they've missed out on. And so, is there something else that we should be doing with our time? And I don't like to even use the word should, but that would be more beneficial to us, that's going to be like that good, better, best, the best thing for us in this moment. And what do we truly value? Are we making the time to really choose the important things in our lives? And are we acting on those things? A lot of times we say, okay, my family is the most important thing to me, but then we sit down to dinner and we're staring at our phones and we're not communicating. And then there's this idea of taking regular breaks from technology. So we've talked about being anxious when we're away from our phones. The more breaks that we take and the more practice that we get, the less anxious that we become when we are taking a break. So we can set ourselves up for success. So it's those out of offices. I'm going to be away from my office and I won't be checking my emails. There's those things. You can tell people, I'm going to take a weekend break from my phone. I'm going to be out of service, out of area. Like, just really setting the tone for, what am I going to do? What am I going to spend my time doing? Am I going to spend my time scrolling through and looking at things? Or am I going to really look at what I can do to create some relationships with the people around me? So having device-free meals or weekends. A lot of times people go on vacation and they're not putting even an out of office thing in their box. They're just saying, oh yeah, I'll just keep checking. It's on vacation. I can work from anywhere. It's setting those boundaries and taking a break. It actually increases our creativity and our ability to get things done, and we become more effective. And then fun. So are we having enough fun? Are we spending time really coming up with things that bring us joy? So Catherine Price, she is talking about the definition of fun, and she says it's this combination of playfulness, of connection, and flow. And flow is that time that it's like time is just passing without us being aware, like it's just going and we're in this flow and just moving along, and it's fun. And it's interesting because you get more energy after you have those times when you've sat and you've laughed and you've just not been on all the time and you've just done something goofy. And a lot of times we think, okay, well, my fun is going on social media and commenting. That's kind of fake fun. There's flow there because you lose time, but you're not truly connecting, as some of the comments said earlier, like we're not truly connecting, and there's not a playfulness part of it. There's this magic that happens. So it's looking at that. It's really just, today it's just talking about becoming more aware of what we're doing consciously, making some conscious decisions. And just like we're hardwired for connection, we're hardwired to play, to engage in these enjoyable experiences just for the sake of enjoyment. And I've told this story to other people before, but it's like, what's play? What's fun? And I think about being a little kid and like playing in the neighborhood, and running around and having no idea what's going to happen next. Oh, I'm going to take my bike and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to see these kids. Maybe we're going to, go down the candy store, which was also the liquor store, and we're going to go there because the liquor store in California has the best candy. And we're going to drive, ride our bikes there, and then we're going to come back and see what candy we were able to get. And it's just this time spent without purpose, and we're connecting to each other, and we're laughing, and we're enjoying, and our nervous systems are relaxed and calm, and we just engage with one another. And it really helps us so much become more creative and to become less stressed about everything that's happening. And we realize we don't need to be perfect. So are we being present in our own lives? Are we paying attention to what we want for ourselves? Are we being present in the moment? Are we getting sucked into things that we don't need to be present? We don't need to be involved in and engaged in. Are we being mindful? And do we have emotional fitness? So here's the other thing. We talked to teens, social emotional learning, like the state of Utah has just given millions of dollars to schools to teach social emotional learning because they're finding what's happening here. These kids don't know how to really interact or how to cope with like difficult things that are happening. And so as adults and parents and watching parents and kids interact, if they're interacting just on these headlines, are they developing that emotional literacy that increases and improves their communication style, that things are actually being expressed? Are we being authentic with the people that we love the most? And what are these emotions telling us? What stories do we tell ourselves about what we're feeling? Are we saying, oh, don't feel anything bad because it's good vibes only. We should just have positive feelings all the time and be happy all the time. And if we're not happy all the time, something's wrong with us or we've done something bad. But kids don't know that. And we're not modeling that for them right now. We need to model that for them, that it's okay for them to just be able to sit with uncomfortable emotions. So really, this is about feeling our feelings and understanding what they're telling us. And then developing that empathy. I've mentioned empathy several times, that adversity is part of this human experience. And so we're all going to have those struggles. And when we're able to communicate with each other and be authentic, then we can send this message to another person that they're not alone, that we see you, that you're valued. And that goes back to our definition of connection, that it's that convergence of these people, seeing each other and valuing each other and supporting each other. So it's encouraging and finding means of encouraging connection and empathy and vulnerability and sharing who we really are. And I love this idea of yes and experiences. Life is really a series of yes and experiences. Yes, things can be really difficult. And at the same time, we can build our connections in those difficult moments. And I think that's an important concept that we don't talk a lot about. Feelings don't mean we're weak. I had my brother-in-law reach out to me this weekend, and he was sharing a bunch of thoughts that he had about just some struggles that he was having. And he said he shared that with a friend, and his friend said, I really didn't take you as somebody who was just so emotional and so just weak. I thought you were stronger than that. And he was apologizing to me for sharing his emotions with me. And I had to go back to him and say, there's nothing to apologize. You didn't say anything that was wrong. You were real and vulnerable and authentic with me, and I'm grateful for that, and that makes me feel closer to you. So please keep sharing those things with me. And I'm sorry your friend viewed you that way, that you were supposed to be strong all the time. So those are the messages that we're receiving and sending to each other back and forth. And then there's this difference between full and partial engagement in our lives. So it's that presence that we're talking about, sometimes we're like, oh yeah, I'm totally present, but I'm also multitasking and everything's, I'm picking up on everything. I can randomly be texting this person and have a conversation on social media and do this and watch a TV show, but we're not fully engaged in anything. So I think it's asking ourselves the question, are we partially or fully engaged in this interaction and what we're doing? And again, this multitasking thing, I'm a super multitasker, but I have to be aware that there's a lot of times I can't be that way. I can't multitask in relationships to people when I'm sitting with them and when I'm engaged with them and when I'm talking to people. But I think a lot of times the message that kids are giving us in the research is that their parents are multitasking and they don't feel like their parents are hearing them. And I don't know that they are sometimes. I don't know that I am sometimes. What are we missing when we're multitasking? And I think it's hard to stay that focused sometimes because our brains are distracted. So what I'm challenging you guys to do, and I appreciate you guys attending this, is really thinking about these questions that we're asking, the engagement, and are we being authentic, and what are the stories that we're saying to ourselves? Are we comparing ourselves? And can we be purposeful and intentional in our decision making? What matters most to us? What are our values? Are we making decisions that support our purpose? Are we acting on our purpose? And can we re-energize ourselves by just taking a break from that social media, maybe we a lot of times use our phones for our alarm clock. So maybe using a regular alarm clock and putting our phones in a different space so we don't go to bed and wake up to our phones. Can we pull away from those things, or does that increase our anxiety? And why does it increase our anxiety? What are we so nervous about missing? Asking ourselves those questions. Who do we want? Do we want to be intentional about our decisions, or do we want these things to start controlling us and we just are acting on those things that are coming at us all the time? And what's going to help us more? Is it going to help us more to be reacting to this technology that we have, or to utilize that technology for our benefit? And I would say, let's utilize it for our benefit rather than, just being acted on. And I love Mr. Rogers. And so I always try to find a quote that I love. And so this is Mr. Rogers. Anything that's human is mentionable, and anything is mentionable can be more manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, less scary. The people we trust with that important talk can help us know that we aren't alone. And so I'm hoping that this just gave us a little bit of a reset to start thinking about how we want to function with the world and how we want to function with the technology around us. And on the last slide, I put references. So if anybody wanted to read these items, you've got your references, and I believe Michael will send out the PowerPoint as well. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Any thoughts, last minute things? Thanks for engaging with us on Zoom today.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Thanks. I liked to have it in your face. I appreciated that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of interesting that we're talking about this very thing. So I thought I'm being a little bit hypocritical if I'm not showing my face on this presentation. So thank you.
And I'm using my phone to take a picture of this really good slide.
Oh,
Well, thank you, Jennifer.
Blessings.
If you have a question, if you'll just give me a second here, I'm going to, Jen, let me still your screen, still the screen.
Yep, I can stop share, right?
Yep, stop share. And for those of you that are looking for, oh, where'd it go now? Sorry. Okay. For CE credits, where'd it go? Let me get this up. Are you seeing that? Okay, so the COM 10, 12, 21, it will be the code word for it. Sorry, let me make sure I do a few things here. Okay.